My name is Michael Morand. I am head of community engagement for Beinecke and Yale Library Special Collections. The piece I have chosen is Langston Hughes' poem, American Heartbreak, part of his extensive archive here. The reason I chose this piece is because it is at once timeless and timely. Short yet poignant, it speaks of the arrival of the first slave ship at Jamestown in 1619. The earliest draft in his archives is dated September 6, 1950. The poem was first published in Phylon, the Atlanta University Review of Race and Culture, in 1951, and had various subsequent appearances down to his last collection of published verse, The Panther and the Lash, in 1967. In September 2020, a handwritten draft by Hughes went viral on our Twitter, with more than 7,000 retweets and likes, the most of any tweet from here ever. People were moved to know that 1619 was a truth Hughes wrote some 70 years ago, a truth that persists no matter how hard uncritical racists try to obscure it.
I love the object itself for the primary text. It feels special, you know. It's just one of the things that I maybe, because I don't so much write anymore, like on a paper with a pen. I'm not in the habit of doing it as much as I used to. Sometimes I feel like I should, because that I can't have things like this that will exist in the world, but it does
certainly increases the value of your future archive.
Yeah, exactly. You got to think about that.
First, I love seeing his handwriting, and therefore his thinking, the tactility of it, as it moved from thought to hand, then to typing. The changes that he made, the word liberty struck through, both a philosophical change and a musical change too. And then of course the small bit of paper all this is written on, how compact it is. The quick, important thoughts scribbled, then gone over. Only a small bit of paper can convey the urgency of such a thought.
The thing that struck me was the size of the paper, right? So there's something very Emily Dickinson about saying this is the construct, the confine of the paper that I am writing on, and the poem has to fit on this small slip. And what can I do with my voice on the page in that kind of a constraint? What happens to my voice?
It's such a small poem in terms of quantity of words. Obviously it's such a immense poem in terms of meaning and resonance, but such a tiny thing, this fluttery bit of paper. And that does really get me actually, that was this small piece of paper that Langston Hughes wrote on with his pencil. And I am affected by the aura of that to some degree. But what I find remarkable with printed matter is its reproducibility, the fact that I could copy that out in my notebook and it would be his poem and the poem would work, or I could voice it out loud and it would be his poem and the poem would work. Obviously that mode of working is a different one to reading on the page, but it has the technology of language being that you can encounter the material support matters and it doesn't matter. It sort of transcends its material support.
I've started to demystify famous writers of yore, and I just sort of try to relate to them just as other writers who are just like me, or artists just like me or whatever, who are finding their way through the world or through their thoughts or their ideas. So it's not important to me necessarily to touch some artifact like this, but it is important for me to just sort of evaluate their words and their ideas the way I would evaluate anybody else.
Well, we have our series of small gestures that accumulate to something very nearly annihilating, that proverbial founding moment of American empire. A stone, a stump, a toe, accumulating into something like what he calls heartbreak. And of course, heartbreak could seem like a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but then you remember that heartbreak can extinguish life. You know, people have died from heartbreak.
Just what he's doing at the level of scaling freedom, you know, like freedom, this massive noun, this like general concept, bumping its toe, is that right? You know, the freedom bumps its toe, like, so it goes from this like massive abstract concept to then something embodied, and then how is its body figured through the toe, through like the smallest part of the body, or one of the smallest parts of the body. And that seems to me just what's happening in the poem, are these large scales of largeness, smallness, kind of telescoping, collapsing of scales, which, yeah, so powerful.
One of the things that I, love about Langston Hughes, and that shows in this poem, is the sense of voice that comes out right from the beginning. So it's, I am the American heartbreak, right? That it's not, we are or they are or whatever. It's literally immediately we are forced to confront a speaker that is describing themselves as the American heartbreak.
Of course, the poem is bracketed by nation, US nation, but many of us outside that nation, Black people in all the Americas, experience his heartbreak even 70 years later. And perhaps nation cannot bracket or contain our desires.
It's both funny, but it's also really in your face about what it means to be a Black man, right, in America, and that it's the embodiment of that heartbreak, right, of promises that were never kept, of manipulation in order to keep people literally not just physically enslaved, but the thing that a lot of times we don't talk about is also all of the lies and manipulation to keep people mentally and psychologically enslaved for generations.
It's like you're sitting on your couch in the morning having your coffee when the sun is coming up, and those slits of light come in through your blind, and you know that 151 million miles in space is a gigantic raging sun producing this phenomena that is reduced in your purview, in your limited scope, as a few lines of something warm called light on your thigh or reflecting in your coffee. That the small things that gesture to the massive thing. And in a sense, it's because that big thing is reducible to something by human logic. It's part and parcel of the heartbreak. But it's Hughes, who had to write that. It's, it could be Gwendolyn Brooks, it could be Lucille Clifton, it might not be Walt Whitman, And so that the small things that accumulate are a big deal.
And Hughes was such a joyful and playful poet, a poet of deep, deep musicality, style, effervescence, elan, cool. And he was a busy writer. He wrote everything, plays, stories. He had the quickest hands. And then I am sad that he had to write this. It's 1950, and I'm not born yet myself. And if anything, I wish him another life, if we could go back. A life where he would not have had to have written this, nor so many have to be grateful that he did. There's a small poem of Hughes that I adore and committed to memory at 17, and it comes back to me always. And it's called Suicide Note. And it goes like this. The calm, cool face of the river asked me for a kiss. It is blues and haiku together and inseparable.